Hey tea heads, this is Don from Mayleaf. In this video, reviewing variable temperature kettles for tea. In this video, I'm going to be telling you what I look out for when purchasing kettles, and I'm going to be reviewing 3 different products. This video is going to go onto the Teawares playlist. If at any point in time you enjoy this video, then please give the video the thumbs up. The more thumbs in the air, the more tea videos are going to come your way. And if you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel yet, then go click that button. Bizarrely enough, this is one of our most requested videos. Anybody who's watched our Mayleaf videos before will recognize this guy here. This is the Camjove T22A that we purchased in China, and we use it in most of our videos. And we get a lot of questions about this kettle and how it works and how it functions and if it's a good kettle. So I thought I would broaden the scope a little bit, and I would reach out to some manufacturers of variable temperature kettles and do a bigger review. So first up, props to the manufacturers that sent us kettles. So we've got Russell & Hobbs. This is the Russell & Hobbs Retro Red kettle. We've got the iSmarter 2.0 kettle, and we've got the Sage Tea Maker kettle. So as I said, we reached out to lots of different manufacturers. A few of them led us up the garden path a little bit, and we've been hanging on for those kettles, but these guys came up trumps. So a big thank you to you guys. This is not product placement. They did not send it for any favorable reviews or paying me anything. This is an honest review of these kettles, and they kindly donated these kettles for this review. The other thing is, I want to say we're not going to be talking about other ways of heating up water today. I'm not going to be talking about tetsubin or cast iron teaware, and I'm not going to be talking also about water. I know a lot of you are keen to get a water video out from us. Believe me, I'm experimenting with TDS meters, pH meters, buying in bottled water. We are working on a water video every time I have a spare minute, so we will get that to you as soon as we possibly can. Today, I want to go through the things that maybe you should be looking out for when selecting a kettle. And I'm going to be breaking down this review into 8 parts. I'm going to be looking at the price of these kettles. Obviously, that's of key importance. The second thing I'm going to be looking for is the build quality. The third is the styling. The fourth is the capacity. The fifth is the speed of brew. The sixth is the actual temperature control and how the temperature control works on these kettles. The seventh is the ergonomics, the brewing pleasure, if you like, of how these work in a Gong Fu session. And finally, the 8th is any other features that I think you should be aware of. So we're going to go through those now, and by the end of it, we will pick a winner. First, let's talk about price. And the reason why I want to get this out of the way is because the rest of this review is going to be a comparative review. So you're going to be knowing the differences in features and my thoughts on the quality. And it's always good for you guys to know the price difference so you can make a personal decision about whether or not those differences are worth the difference in price. So the Russell & Hobbs Retro Red is the most affordable out of these 3 products. This retails at $79.99 Great British pounds, which works out at about $100 US. The iSmarter 2.0 is $99.99, again pounds, which equates to about $125 US. The Sage Tea Maker is $199.99, which equates to about $250. So this is double the price of this, and this one is the most affordable. It is worth noting, for all of those raising their eyebrows, that this one has extra features in it, where it's got a brewing chamber here, which lowers into the water and brews tea within the kettle. But I'm going to be talking about that at the end of this video when we talk about other features. For the rest of this video, it's going to be a comparative on the use as a kettle, just as a variable use kettle, but it's worth you knowing about those extra features from the beginning. In case you're wondering, this little guy over here set us back $60 in China. Okay, let's move on to build quality. So let's take a closer look at these products and look at the quality of their build. I have to say, first and foremost, this Camjove is a really simple workhorse kettle, and it doesn't have the best build quality. It's a little bit rattly. When it boils, you can certainly hear it. It's like rattling away. The lid is making a lot of noise. You know, it does what it should, and it's really reliable, but it's not the best build quality. And when you boil, if you overboil, water starts to splash over the end of the spout if you overfill it. You know, it's not refined in any way. the build quality on is not great. Let's look at these guys here. The Russell & Hobbs, remember the price difference, guys, that's really, really important. The Russell & Hobbs has good build quality. I would say it's good, it's not great. Let me try and bring this a bit closer. We're going to get some nice close-up shots so that you can see these kettles in their full glory. But you know, it's good. It has a nice handle, it's got a good weight about it. My problem is this lid. This lid is made with metal which is a bit too thin and it's a little bit rattly. I don't particularly like that. But apart from that, the rest of the body is solid. Everything is solid. The base is solid. So it's pretty decent build quality. The iSmarter 2.0 is great build quality. This is solid, really, really solid. We've been using this in Gong Fu sessions and you know, it hasn't let us down. The push button control on here is really, really nice. You know, there's no rattle in it. It's really, really solid. Good solid metal casing, very good build quality. Similarly, the Sage Kettle here is very, very good build quality. Really, really thick glass, a nice solid base, and a nice strong handle. They all have good handles. One thing that I look for in kettles is that they're free of plastic as much as possible. You know, heating water in plastic is not something that I personally want to do, and I seek to avoid that. This is personal. I know there's a lot of controversy about plastics and water and whether or not they leach, etc., etc., etc. I personally prefer to avoid the whole discussion by not having any plastics in my kettle. And that's where the Russell & Hobbs lets us down a little bit, because it has a large plastic housing for the temperature gauge. And it also has 3 plastic tabs, which you may be able to remove, but it's got a fair amount of plastic in this Russell & Hobbs, and that's something that is definitely a negative from my point of view. The Smarter and the Sage have no plastic within the body, within the chamber, except for when you fill the kettle up, the maximum level indicator is made out of plastic. So as long as you don't fill up to that point, then the water is not in contact with any plastic. Obviously the lid is plastic, and you know, the pouring area has a bit of plastic, so you know, you're not going to avoid it completely. Similarly, the Sage tea maker has no plastic as long as you don't fill up to the top. This brewing chamber, however, that fits in here, and we're going to talk about that later, does have some plastic, so that might be worth noting in case you're concerned about that. It's very, very difficult to find any kettles that have no plastic at all, except this guy. He may be cheap, he may be simple, but it's all stainless steel, no plastic at all. So that's definitely a plus that goes the way of the Camjove. Another thing that I look out for with kettles, especially because we're doing Gong Fu brewing, and probably a lot of you are doing Gong Fu brewing, I like to have the kettle close to me. I like to have it by the coffee table, by the tea table, and we like to have it very close by. And so I always look for kettles that have cords that are quite long, so I'm not having to drag out extension cables. The Russell & Hobbs is a bit short. Similarly, the iSmarter 2.0, a bit short. You're going to be reaching, you're probably going to need a extension cable. These guys here though, the Sage is a bit longer. The Camjove is definitely the longest. So Camjove wins on that one. But this is pretty good. Obviously, if you're not doing, if you're not having the kettle right next to you when you're Gong Fu brewing and you're filling up a thermos, and this is just stationary plugged into the kitchen, then that's an irrelevance, and the cord length doesn't really matter. Okay, that's my 2 cents worth. Let's move on to style. Visual aesthetics are obviously a matter of taste, but it is important that you like the look of your kettle, especially if it is part of a Gong Fu setup. Let's start over here. The Camjove is not particularly the most stylish kettle in the world, in my opinion. It has a charm. It has a kind of Chinese authentic charm to it. You know, it has its own look, but I wouldn't call it particularly stylish. The Sage tea maker here, this has, you know, got I would say, an arresting, quite striking look about it. Obviously, it's the only kettle that's see-through, that's made of glass, and that adds a certain theatre to your tea brewing as you watch the water heating up. You start to see the bubbles. If you want to get geeky about it, then you can start to guess the temperature of the water by the size of the bubbles like they do in China, but you don't really need to do that when you've got an LED showing you the temperature here. But one thing I think that they've kind of let themselves down on a bit here is the look of this base unit. It's made out of a plastic which is meant to look like metal. It looks a little bit cheap in my opinion, especially for the price. Also, the sound of this kettle, when it reaches temperature, I will let you hear the sound. Okay, so that sound for me is far too loud and a little bit obtrusive and doesn't really contribute nicely to the Gong Fu session. But apart from that, I think the top of it looks pretty smart. The iSmarter 2.0, I like the style of this. I think this is a very simple, very minimal style. Obviously, it's a different look to the other kettles, and I particularly think that this is pretty smart and pretty neutral and will sit quite happily within any Gong Fu setup. It may not suit a traditional setup as much, but it's a nice kettle and would suit most environments. The Russell & Hobbs styling is more traditional, more retro. It's called the retro red. So if it's suited to your setup, then great. This is probably gonna really look good within certain setups. It's very striking, nice color. It doesn't have any sounds, so there's nothing to like or dislike on that. But you know, the styling is nice. The retro look is nice. It's not particularly to my taste. There are a few things that I would change on it, like this quite tinny looking emblem here. I think that either shouldn't be there or it should be made in the same metal as the lid. But you know, these are small points. Overall, it's quite a striking design and quite a striking style and may well look good within your setup. Okay, next, capacity. Depending on your Gong Fu setup, you may be looking for a kettle with a larger water capacity so that you're not having to rush back and forth to the kitchen tap too much. This Russell & Hobbs Retro Red has a 1.7 litre capacity, which is pretty big. The iSmarter 2.0 has a 1.8 litre, so slightly larger, and it's the biggest capacity compared with all of the kettles here. The Sage Tea Maker has a 1.5 litre, so slightly less, but still a pretty big capacity. And this little cam jove has only a litre. And if you fill it up more than a litre, it will let you know about it because it's going to spurt water out of the spout. So they're all of these three have relatively large capacities. I have to say, whilst using this in our Gong Fu sessions, I have loved the larger capacities of these guys here. It has meant that we don't have to go back and forth to the kitchen too often, and it has just made the Gong Fu sessions a little bit easier. But as I said, they're all relatively large capacity. Okay, how fast do they heat up water? You don't want to be waiting too long for your water to be heating up. So I filled up each of these kettles with 1 litre of cold water and timed how long it took for them to bring the water to the boil. Russell & Hobbs, the manufacturers of this Retro Red kettle, proudly announced that this kettle will bring 1 cup of cold water to boil in 55 seconds. And I have to say, they were not lying. This kettle was the fastest heating kettle. It took 2 minutes and 9 seconds for this kettle to bring 1 litre of cold water to the boil. The iSmarter 2.0 was in second place, not too far behind. This was 2 minutes and 18 seconds, so just about 10 seconds difference between the two. Not a huge difference. The Sage Tea Maker took 3 minutes 31 seconds, so nearly a minute and a half longer to bring 1 litre to the boil, which is a fair amount of time to wait. The cam jove, this little cam jove here, took 4 minutes and 19 seconds. 4 minutes and 19 seconds to bring the boil, and now I know why our YouTube videos are so long. Right, moving on to temperature control. This is probably the most fundamental factor for all you tea heads, because all of you know that controlling the temperature of your water is paramount to mastering and experimenting with tea brewing. I've done videos about this before. I'll put links in the description below and a card will pop up here. It's worth noting right off the bat that the Sage Tea Maker and the iSmarter 2.0 are kettles where you can set the temperature and walk away, and it will bring the water to that temperature. The Cam Jove and the Russell & Hobbs, you turn them on and you have to be around to turn them off, otherwise they will just go to boiling point. So that's a key difference here. These are more convenient because you can set the temperature and let it do its business. The way that you set the temperature on the iSmarter is you use an app. So you have an app which you download, which connects wirelessly to the iSmarter, and you can control the temperature. I had no problems setting up this app. I think it will work for even the worst technophobes. It's not difficult to set it up over wireless, and it works very well. It communicates very well with the kettle, and it's got a nice display, very simple for you to set the temperature. You can look at the capacity of the water, so you can see how much water is in the kettle, and you can choose to keep the water at temperature, so it will hold water at the temperature that you want. So it's very convenient, it works very well, it makes for a very sleek design because you're using all of the controls on your phone. Obviously, the problem with that is that if you don't have your phone on you, or your phone has run out of juice, then you have no way of controlling temperature or seeing what the temperature is of the water inside. You only have one button at the base of the kettle, which basically acts as an on-off and brings it to boiling point. So that's a downside, but it is very sleek and works very well. And I have to say, it's really nice when you're sitting, you know, not next to your kettle, to just say, oh, let's brew some more tea, hit start, and your kettle makes a nice sound and it starts brewing to the temperature that you want. So that's really good, but you need your phone on you. The Sage Tea Maker, it's all done at the front. There's lots of buttons here to control the temperature. You can control the temperature increments by 5 degrees. This one is to the 1 degree Celsius. This is to 5 degrees. So this is obviously a little bit more accurate than this one, but this one is very good as well. So you can set it and then walk away and it will bring the water up to temperature. In terms of the accuracies of these, they were both pretty accurate. This one was more accurate. The probe was measuring plus or minus 1 degree. I was measuring with a temperature probe. The water is plus or minus 1 degree compared to the reading on the phone app. Obviously, because these are only in 5 degree increments, this has got a larger room for error, and this I found was about plus or minus 3 degrees. This has a keep warm function as well. So you can bring the water to the temperature and it will hold it. So both of these, if you were sitting brewing green tea, you could say I want it at 75 degrees or 165 degrees Fahrenheit. You could set it, walk away, it would bring it to temperature, and then it would hold it at that temperature for your Gong Fu session. That's something that you may be looking for. One thing I have to say, the differences between these two is that this one tends to overshoot its temperature. So if you set 80 degrees, it tends to overshoot it by a fair amount, about 10 degrees, and then it brings it back down and then it holds it, but it tends to overshoot the temperature a little bit. This one, however, it may heat up more slowly, but it stops the heating unit at the right time to bring it to the temperature that's set. One disadvantage of the Sage tea brewer here is that you cannot see the live temperature unless the kettle is heating. So just by lifting up and putting it back down, it doesn't show you on the LED the live temperature. That's a bit of a shame. It only does it if it's in heating mode, whereas this, you can look at your phone and you can always see a live temperature. Okay, so that deals with these two. Let's talk about the Russell & Hobbs. This has an analog display here on the outside. So one of the great things about this is that you can always see the temperature, and that's live, so that's good. The analog display is a stylistic thing. Do you prefer analog or do you prefer the digital display? It's obviously a little bit harder to read because you're having to kind of judge where the needle is, but I have to say it is very accurate. When I was testing with the temperature probe, it is accurate to plus or minus 1 or 2 degrees Celsius. So I was quite impressed with the accuracy of this. Live temperature, so you can see it, that's really good. The downside on it is that, as I said, it doesn't let you set the temperature and bring it to that temperature. One of the other things is you kind of watching the temperature gauge go up, and when it hits 80 degrees, you flick the switch to turn it off. It will again overshoot the temperature by about 7 or 8 degrees. This guy is very, very simple to this one. Really nice because you get a digital display of the live temperature. So in terms of live temperature function, this is probably the best because you don't need a phone. You can just see it immediately, live temperature function in digital display, but it does overshoot as well and has an accuracy tolerance of about 3 or 4 degrees, so not exactly accurate. So they're all different. They all have their pluses and minuses. It's up to you as to which features you like the sound of and which features mean less to you. Okay, moving on to ergonomics. As I said, we have been road testing all of these kettles to the max over the last few weeks. We've been doing lots of Gong Fu sessions and we've gotten to know them quite well. And it's fundamentally important how the kettle feels, the ergonomics, you know, the pleasure that it gives you whilst you are brewing. So one of the key things for me is the pouring mechanism of the kettle. How accurate it is, what the flow is like. It may sound quite geeky, but all you tea heads know that the pouring of the water is very, very important. So we're going to show you some close-ups of the pouring of the water. And we're going to start with the Russell & Hobbs. Now the Russell & Hobbs poured pretty well. It was controllable and, you know, accurate. So it was a decent pour that you could get from this kettle, and we liked it quite a lot. The iSmarter 2.0, this was probably the worst pouring mechanism. The spout on this is very, very short, and I think what they've done is they've sacrificed function for styling here. It may look very nice, this very discreet spout, but it means that the pouring is not very accurate, and we found that it was either quite dribbly or too fast, and it was a little bit frustrating. The Sage again had a spout that was a bit too short, and so the pour was not too easy to control, a little bit dribbly. We didn't like it too much. Also, I have to say, this is a really heavy kettle. So when it's filled with water and you're pouring, the balance of it just doesn't feel that right, and it's kind of hard to control the pour of it. So we felt that this was very, very heavy, too heavy, and the pour was not great on it. The Camjove by far was the winner. I wish that one of these kettle manufacturers would make a kettle with a longer spout. It may not look as good stylistically, and I know there are kettles out there with a longer spout, and as you can see, the pour mechanism on the Camjove is flawless. You could control it fast, slow, and it was very, very accurate. Apart from the pour, the kettles held up pretty well. They have good ergonomics. The handles feel all very, very solid, you know, very good grip. They don't get hot at all. So the handles are all really nice. As I said, I have a problem with this one in terms of its balance and its weight. But apart from that, you know, the handle is very, very good. The Smarter I liked. Shame about the pour, but the ergonomics are nice. And the Russell & Hobbs, I would say, is probably the best out of the bunch in terms of balance. It's very lightweight, so it doesn't kind of, you know, weigh down in the hand too much. It had a decent controllable pour, definitely the best out of these three. So I would say in terms of ergonomics, the Russell & Hobbs wins. Okay, finally, let's talk about their other features. Finally, let's move on to the bells and whistles, the extra features that these kettles have. And let's start with the Russell & Hobbs, because this kettle has no extra features. It is what it is. It's a good kettle. It has got a temperature gauge, good ergonomics, good capacity, fast heating. It's a good kettle, but it has nothing extra hidden on it. The Camjove has this little extra spout. This you can connect a tube, a plastic tube that comes with the kettle, and you can submerge the other end into bottled water. That means that you can basically install this at your desk, and when your kettle is empty, you open up the lid, push the button, and it will pump water and fill up the kettle. And that actually is really quite enjoyable. You can sit there, hit go, and refill your kettle without having to go to the kitchen. They use this a lot in China. If you go to China, you will tend to see installed kettles where they have big bottled water underneath the desk, and they're refilling. If you don't like water in plastic and you don't want water going through plastic tubes, then obviously that's not for you. But it is a nice little feature. But by far, the most feature-laden of the kettles in front of me are these two here, especially the Sage tea maker. And this is really kind of its USP. So we'll talk about that last. Let's talk about the iSmarter. As I said, all of the features here are hidden. They're all on the app on your phone. So the app lets you set the temperature within 1 degree increments. It lets you see how much water is inside the kettle, which is something that's actually quite nice. We used it a fair amount. It also has a keep warm function, so you can keep the temperature set at the level that you want, and it will hold the water at that temperature. So nice features. But as I said before, the feature that we liked the most out of it is that you can brew from anywhere. In other words, you can switch the kettle on wherever you are. And I know that sounds quite trivial, but it's something quite nice when you're lounging back, enjoying tea, or where you're a little bit far away from the kettle. Invariably, you have your phone near you. You just click start. It makes a nice little sound, so you can hear that it's registered your command, and it starts to bring water up to temperature. It's actually a really nice feature, and something that we were surprised that we were using and enjoying quite a lot. So lots of features in this kettle, and all controlled with the app. This guy here has got lots and lots of features. So let's talk about it as a kettle first. It has customizable temperature setting, as I said. It's got a 60-minute keep warm function, so it will hold the water or the tea if you're brewing tea in this, and we'll talk about this in a second. It's programmable, so you can basically program it to start and stop when you want. So you could program it to start whilst you're still in bed, so it's ready for you when you wake up. That obviously brings us to this guy here. So this is a big brewing basket, and it has a really nice magnetic catch here, really good quality magnetic catch, and that holds the water, holds the tea, the dry tea leaf above the water level. So you would bring the water level maximum to about here. And then on the front, you've got preset for green, black, white, oolong, herbal, and custom. Now, I disagreed with their settings, but that's because I'm a geek, and I have very, very particular settings with my tea. But the great thing about this tea maker is that you can set it yourself. So you can set the temperature, you can set how long you want the brewing basket to be in the water. And what happens is, when the water reaches the temperature that you've set it to, then this brewing basket lowers into the water and the tea starts to infuse. And as I said, you can decide with a fair degree of flexibility how long the brewing basket stays in the water before it comes up. So you're basically controlling the steeping time. So that means that you're brewing tea within this chamber, and then the tea will stay warm at the temperature that you have set for it. We tested it out a little bit. Obviously, we're Gong Fu brewers. We're not going to be brewing in 1 liter, 1.5 liters of water, but we tested it out. It does work very well. I would say that it works better for teas that are not going to change too quickly. So I'd be looking at darker oolong teas, those kind of teas, maybe pu'er teas for this. I wouldn't be using it for green tea so much because of the fact that, the tea is more reactive with the air, and therefore it's going to change much quicker. So you don't want to be brewing a liter of the tea. But it does work well. The keep warm function works well. It all works as it says it should, but clearly if you're a Gong Fu brewer, then you're not really going to be using that function. But if you are kind of on the go and you want to brew some Western style tea, or you want to set your tea leaves up and you want to wake up to hot tea as soon as you wake up, then you can program this to your heart's content. And it will be brewing tea for you. This is really the USP for this kettle. This is the unique selling point for this kettle and why the price is a lot higher. Okay, tea heads, I think it's time that we make some judgments. We have used these kettles, as I said, for the past few weeks. There are disadvantages and advantages on each one. To give you a brief rundown, this is a very affordable kettle. Good temperature control, not great because you can't set the temperature, a little bit tinny, but good capacity and very fast heating with nice ergonomics and a good pour. This one here, feature laden, nice and smart with the smartphone application, works very well, very high capacity, fast heating, good ergonomics, but the pour is a bit let down. It's worth saying at this point that this is version 2.0 and iSmarter are about to release a version 3 of this. I don't know what the version 3 is going to be like, but this is a 2.0, so keep an eye out for the version 3. They may have improved the pour on it, I don't know. This one here, the most feature laden. You can brew tea in it if you want, but you don't have to. You can use it as a standalone kettle. It works very well. It brings temperature accurately. It's a little bit slower, but not too much slower, and has got a good capacity. My only gripe with it really is the weight, and the pour is a bit cumbersome. And finally, the little cam drove. Smaller capacity, very slow at heating up the water, doesn't particularly have great build quality, doesn't have particularly great style, but the pour on this is flawless. The pour on this is excellent, and it is a really enjoyable way to make tea. If you force me to make a decision, because I hate reviews where people don't make a decision, if you force me to choose a kettle out of these four, I would go for the iSmarter. I think just overall, in terms of the overall package, capacity, speed, the looks, the function, I think that I can just about get over the short spout on it, and I would go with this one. But you know what? They're all decent kettles, and I have to say again, a big thank you to the manufacturers that kindly donated them for this review. So which is your favorite? Let us know in the comments section below. You've heard what I think. Which one would you use the most? Which features do you think are the most important? And do you want me to do more of these kettle reviews? Because if you do, I can reach out to the other manufacturers out there to see what they can provide to us, and we can compare more kettles. That's it, tea heads. If you made it to the end of this video, then please give the video the thumbs up. Check out our YouTube playlist and let us know if there are any videos that you would like us to make. If you're ever in London, then come visit us in Camden to say hi and taste our wares. If you have any questions or comments, then please fire them over. Other than that, I'm Don May from Mayleaf. Thank you for being a part of the revelation of true tea. Stay away from the tea bags, keep drinking the good stuff, and spread the word, because nobody deserves bad tea. Bye.